All right, here we go with part 2 of our digestion video. We left at the stomach. So here's the liver. The liver, no food goes in here, but it is part circulatory organ, part digestive organ because it helps with both. It is more important in your circulatory system, but the liver does make bile, and bile is stored in this little bag called a gallbladder and secreted through this tube called the bile duct. So there were 3 items on your diagram there to notice or to label, but bile helps digest fats. So it is not officially an enzyme. It does not end in ASE, just a chemical made by your liver secreted into the duodenum to help you digest fats. So I remember this. Billy likes to eat liver and he also likes to eat fat. So bile kind of looks like the word Billy, made in the liver, stored in the gallbladder. There's another B, and Billy ate a lot of fat, so he had to secrete bile to digest those fats. So if you get a gallstone, you'd have to get your gallbladder removed, which means that for a while you would not be able to eat a very fatty diet, but your body would compensate. Your liver would just start making more bile on a daily basis since it wouldn't be able to store it. That's about it for that. Gallbladder, we just talked about. It's the bag that holds that bile for us. And the bile duct is a tube that actually goes through the pancreas and hooks onto the pancreatic duct. Again, both the pancreas and the gallbladder secrete digestive chemicals and enzymes into the top of your small intestine called the duodenum. So you just need to know what they all do, but they do not have food in them. Pancreas is super important. It is a key part of homeostasis. I want to explain that. But your pancreas is an organ. It looks like a feather. It hides behind your stomach and it makes lots of chemicals to help with digestion. The most important chemicals, if you remember your stomach is full of acid, we need to neutralize that acid or else the rest of your digestive system would have holes burned in it. Nothing else is lined with mucus like your stomach. So one of the most important things the pancreas does is make a chemical called bicarbonate. That bicarbonate gets secreted into the duodenum to neutralize that stomach acid. That is super important. The pancreas makes lots of digestive enzymes, and all of the food that has not yet been chemically digested will finish that in this top part of the small intestine called the duodenum. So I'll talk about the duodenum in a minute. All you need to know is the pancreas makes lots of enzymes. You need to know that it makes bicarbonate to neutralize stomach acid because that helps with homeostasis. We're returning that balance to a neutral pH. Your pancreas also makes insulin on an as-needed basis. Insulin actually gets secreted directly into your bloodstream. And when glucose ends up in your blood as a result of digestion, that insulin it hooks onto one of those proteins on a cell membrane and it will tell your cell, oh, go and open up a channel to let glucose in. If your body does not make insulin, your cells cannot absorb glucose and you are a type 1 diabetic, which is really dangerous. One of the first signs of diabetes is you get really thirsty and you have to go to the bathroom all the time. That's because that environment around your cell ends up being full of glucose because the glucose can't get in without insulin. So if there's a lot of sugar out here, water will leave your cell and go out into this hypertonic environment. So your body tissues get flooded with water, which eventually gets filtered out by your kidneys and you go to the bathroom, but it leaves you dehydrated. People with type 1 diabetes usually lose lots of weight right away. It is super dangerous to not be able to make energy in your cells. Sounds like a great weight loss tool, but it would only work so long and then you would be very, very sick and not surviving very long. So people with type 1 diabetes have to take insulin, usually in the form of a shot, so that insulin can be in their blood and they have to monitor their blood glucose so they know how much insulin actually to take in. So, super important organ right here. Pancreatic cancer is a very deadly type of cancer. Obviously, your pancreas is super important, but it's mostly because of location. If you get a tumor in your pancreas, you might get some stomach aches or not, your digestive system will seem like it's not working that great because probably these enzymes are being affected, but it's really hard to see or feel a tumor in the pancreas because of its location in your body. All right, so more information, you should pause and write that down. The duodenum, it is the top part of the small intestine. So your small intestine is divided into 3 segments. I want you to know the name of the duodenum because lots of chemical digestion happens here. I've already talked about that a little bit, and we're going to move on. So it is this top part that the bile duct and the pancreatic duct secrete into. Here's a picture of gastric bypass. So it basically passes by this duodenum, which doesn't allow you to digest a lot of food. If the food never goes in here, all those fats and a lot of other nutrients don't get absorbed. Therefore, your body can't absorb those calories. Kind of a dangerous way to live. The people that get gastric bypass have to take a lot of supplements because their body isn't getting the nutrition, but it does work for weight loss because your body also isn't getting those calories. This is an example of a stomach being stapled. So they basically just made the stomach smaller and then bypassed part of the small intestine. Kind of crazy. All right, your small intestine is super long. After the duodenum, nothing else really happens in here except lactase is our last enzyme. It's made in the lining of the small intestine, and this is where dairy sugars are absorbed. If you are lactose intolerant, it is because your body doesn't do a good job of making lactase. When you eat milk, you'll get a big gut ache because there's just food going through here that didn't get broken down, and so it upsets your small intestine. So that is the last chemical digestion, is just lactase. Not really physical digestion, everything's already broken down, but there is peristalsis to push things through. The main job, though, is absorbing nutrients. That is what you need to know. And there's a lot of surface area in your small intestine. Here's the lining of your small intestine. There's lots of little hairs. Those hairs are called villi, and each villi is actually covered with microvilli. All it is doing is passing on or making lots of surface area so that there's lots of contact between food products and your bloodstream so that you can absorb all those nutrients. If you were to spread out all the surface area of your small intestine, it would be the size of a tennis court. So your small intestine actually has lots of surface. It's about 20 feet long if you weren't alive. While you're living, though, you have muscle tension, and your small intestine is about 10 feet long. So you need to write down this stuff. Your appendix, actually super important. It hangs right off this juncture of small and large intestine, and people used to think it didn't do anything for us. It has since been discovered that your appendix stores bacteria that's super important for the end of digestion and processing of minerals that happens in your large intestine. We talked about this in that nasty bug article. If you don't have bacteria in your large intestine, you can't digest all those plant products that the rest of your body couldn't digest. So I'll talk about that in a minute, but we have to have bacteria. So they think that your small intestine, when you are sick and you have diarrhea and a lot of bacteria gets flushed out of you, this appendix can squirt back in fresh baby bacteria to recolonize your small intestine. If your appendix gets nicked and that bacteria ends up out here in your body cavity, it can be deadly. If you have a surgery and they nick your colon, all that bacteria that lives in here that helps us will get out here and it can be deadly. So that's why an appendix is so dangerous. It's full of bacteria that we actually need for digestion, but if it gets out of that closed digestive system, it's super dangerous. All right, your large intestine, this is the last victory lap around until it goes out. The only thing that happens in here as far as what your body does is it squeezes out the water, it reabsorbs the water, so we're going to recycle a lot of that water right into your body, and the waste products, everything that you couldn't digest, plus a lot of this bacteria that goes along with it, moves out the other end. So all this bacteria that lives mostly in this beginning part of your large intestine, super important for digestion. It breaks down undigestible food. It also helps produce vitamins. So again, we have to have lots of bacteria living here. That bacteria is not part of us. It's another organism living inside our body. And like in that nasty bug article, if that bacteria isn't there, we get really sick. And in that article, they recolonized that woman's large intestine with somebody else's bacteria from somebody else's poop. Because again, a lot of bacteria is going to slough right off into this bottom part here. This bacteria breaks apart food that we can't eat, like it will try to break apart cell walls of plants, like the corn, the covering of a corn kernel. So when you eat beans, a musical fruit, there are lots of cell walls in beans. This bacteria will break it down. Beans are a musical fruit because when you pass gas, that is actually a byproduct of all this bacteria doing its job. So your toots are really bacteria bad breath. And the bacteria comes from, or the bad breath of that bacteria or your gas comes from this bacteria breaking down undigestible food. So we tend to pass gas when we eat a lot of plant material. It's actually good for you, so go for it, toot away. But also if you eat things that really aren't food. So if you eat a box of Twinkies, you might get doubled over and have gas pain, and you're going to stink because your bacteria was trying to digest all that undigestible food, and your bacteria secreted those gases, and so you pass gas. Gas can also come from your small intestine. For example, if you are lactose intolerant, by the time that milk gets down here, the bacteria will break that down. You're in pain, and we call it gas pains because your small intestines are cramping up, but then you can get rid of that pain by getting rid of all that gas. The diaphragm, this is our last thing, it is not part of your digestive system, but it is a muscle that separates our body cavities. So the top half of your chest is your heart and lungs. We're going to learn about that next. The bottom half is your digestive system, and the esophagus takes the food from your mouth down to that bottom half. So the diaphragm is just a muscle to separate the two parts of your abdominal cavity. Okay, video here if you want to watch it. Otherwise, that is it for digestion. You need to know the path of food, where everything is digested, so carbohydrates in the mouth by amylase, protein in the stomach with pepsin. Everything else happens in the duodenum because of bile from your liver and other enzymes from your pancreas. And then milk gets digested by lactase in the small intestine. And water is reabsorbed in the large intestine. So we're going to spend a couple days practicing this. See you later.